Residential life is a unique experience of Harvard College. There are 12 residential upperclassmen houses where students move in after housing day. Named after Increase Mather, who was a clergyman and Harvard's 6th president, Mather House was built in 1970. It is one of the 12 houses with a unique brutalist architecture which breaks Harvard's red brick norm. House life at Harvard comprises faculty deans, resident scholars, tutors, house aides, and students. Keith Raffel is a resident scholar here. To the undergraduates, he is a mentor, a neighbor, and a constant presence in the courtyard. But his presence at Mather is a homecoming. Keith was in the first sophomore class to move to Mather House in 1972.
So we moved in and we lived down in the low-rise for a semester before it moved to the tower room. I lived on the 11th floor senior year. Junior, I lived in that room, whatever it is. Well, it must be spring. Karen's got shorts on. It must be spring, you've got your shorts on.
Well, it is.
I mean, hurrahs, you never know when it is. It could be the coldest day of the year and you've got shorts on.
Could be Christmas, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Keith has lived many lives. He's worked in policy, built companies, and written novels. Now, he's a columnist, writing about social issues shaping the world.
Well, Sam, you know I graduated from Mather House. I was in the first contingent of students to move into Mather House when it was brand new. Had a wonderful undergraduate experience. People ask me in the dining hall, probably including you, what's different between Mather House now and Mather House then? And my answer usually is 3 things. First is least important. It's hard for students to believe, but the food is better now. In the old days, you just went up there and stuck out your plate and they put something on it, including Salisbury steak, something we'd call mystery meat. Who knows what it was? And that was the only choice you had. Now, of course, we have a salad bar, a fruit bar, a pasta bar, a grill, etc. Many more choices. Great. But let me talk about the 2 more important things. Sam, what should I talk about? The thing that's better or the thing that's worse first? Let me talk about the thing that's better first. The thing that's better now, when I was in Mather House as an undergraduate, believe it or not, the year I moved in, it was all men, no women. In addition, we were kind of the same. We were a bunch of white guys, black guys too, and we'd come from similar backgrounds and it was a little dull. I hadn't come from a similar background because I was from California, which made me unusual in those days. But we were kind of the same. And it was a little bit duller because of that. Now it's wonderful. There are people from all over the world. Of course, there are women there. There's vibrancy, interest, diversity that just makes Mather House a more exciting place to live. So what's worse now is that students care so much about money, about making it, and they think that that's the most important thing in life. I have a sign right over here on my office wall that says, "Who is wealthy? The person who's happy with what they have." I don't think people look at it that way. They measure success only by dollars and cents, and that's a mistake. That's not the most important thing in life. More and more people, the number of students studying humanities is down by well over half in the last 15 years, and everybody's running towards STEM because they think that that's the answer. Maybe, and of course there were STEM concentrators when I was here too, but there's more to life than just making money, working hard and all that. There's friends, family, there's doing something to make the world a better place. And I'll tell you, my classmates felt that much more strongly than the students today, and I think that's a shame.
Keith grew up between Palo Alto, California, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and both places have shaped who he is today.
So I grew up in Palo Alto, California. I'm a California boy. Everybody knows where Palo Alto is today. I used to say when I was an undergraduate here, they'd say, "Where are you from?" And you'd say, 30 miles south of San Francisco. But since those days, Palo Alto's become ground zero for Silicon Valley. So how did I end up there? I was born in Chicago. And it depends on whom you believe. My parents moved from Chicago to the Bay Area when electronics, silicon chips, software was not that big a deal. My father went to work for a company called Ampex, which was one of the first tech companies out there.
I've been coming to you from one of the world's most astonishing and versatile devices, an Ampex tape recorder.
And they were famous for inventing the videotape recorder of all things. What a life. I lived in Palo Alto. It was a lazy college town. Palo Alto, of course, is where Stanford is, but in those days, Stanford wasn't the worldwide famous university that it is today. We were a lazy college town. Went to Stanford games, sold malted milk, sold malted milk in the stands to make a little extra money. I didn't miss any Stanford games growing up. That's where I was. But I hit age 17, and I said, I got to get out of this place. It's just dull. And I did. That was rare in Palo Alto High School in those days. Most of my friends went to either one of the campuses of the University of California or to Stanford, which was across the street from my high school. But I wanted to get out of there, and I did. I came 3,000 miles across. I came 3,000 miles across the country. There were not that many Californians here, and it was almost like going. After I graduated from college, I went to Oxford for 2 years, and of course I was American, and it was different. It was no different coming here when I was 17 years old. It felt like a completely different country. But as with England, I got acclimated and loved my 4 years here.
Keith graduated from college with a degree in history, but spent much of his career working in tech back home in California.
It's a funny thing that I concentrated in history as an undergraduate, because I spent most of my career in tech in what became Silicon Valley, in my hometown of Palo Alto. And I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but I found that history was a pretty good foundation for a tech career. It taught you to analyze data. It taught you to put yourself in other people's heads and see what they were thinking. It taught you to ask the right questions. I've never regretted concentrating in history. And there have been a number of people in Silicon Valley, including my one-time billionaire boss, Tom Siebel, who were history concentrators as well. It's good training for almost anything. I'm grateful because it gave me a broad perspective on people, events, and this sounds crazy if you're talking about history, and what might happen in the future.
Before his career in tech, Raffel served as counsel to the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence from 1977 to 1981.
After graduating from Harvard, I went to Oxford for 2 years on a scholarship, and lucky me, really lucky me, it was wonderful, and studied British and European history in the 19th and 20th centuries. But when it came time to look for a job, it occurred to me there weren't any. Any slots for British historians, modern British historians, were pretty much filled. And it dawned on me, well, I better find something, because although I think it's important that you do something that you like and that's meaningful, you also have to eat. So I came back to Harvard and went to law school for 3 years. I went to law school, and while in law school, I worked, of course, for a New York law firm whose name will remain a secret, and I really did not like it. Oh, these people, they thought that their clients, who were all in the Fortune 500, were picked on and poor and deprived, and they had to make lots of money, and that was the most important thing. It didn't matter how they treated their employees. And I decided, because I was in my 20s and naive, I said, no, I have to do something to change the world. Lucky for me, the first woman resident tutor in Mather House was working in Washington for the Church Committee, which was exploring U.S. intelligence activities in the 1950s and 60s.
Full public accounting of FBI domestic intelligence operations. Therefore, this committee has undertaken such an investigation.
She got me an interview with its successor committee, which was called the U.S. Select Committee on U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and my goodness, they hired me. I still remember my last interview. The chairman of the committee was Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii, who was a World War II hero. He'd lost his arm in the war. Actually, the airport in Honolulu is named after him today. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Anyway, I'm having my interview, and this is before the internet, before anything. And I'm going into my interview, and I go, oh my goodness. I wish Senator Inouye did not lose his arm in the war, but he did. But if he lost his arm, and I don't know which one it was, let it be his left arm, because I don't know how to shake hands with someone without a right arm. I never have. Needless to say, he had lost his right arm. And so I didn't know how to shake his hand. And of course, so what I did is I stuck out my left hand. I learned that was not the way you shake his hand, or not the way he preferred to shake his hand. So in any case, maybe he didn't mind, and we proceeded. He was a tough guy. He said to me, I think we're going to hire you unless you've done something bad since we last spoke. And I went, trying to bring a little levity to the situation. I said, well, Senator, I've taken the bar exam. And he leaned forward and growled, did you pass? Of course, I had no idea if I'd passed or not. I was not going to find out for 3 more months. And I leaned forward and growled, yes, sir, and got hired. And thank goodness I did pass that bar exam.
One of the major things the committee worked on was the Classified Information Procedures Act.
So it was remarkable what happened in my tenure on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I was the third lawyer hired by the committee, but within 9 months of being there, the other 2 lawyers had left. So there I was, 27 years old, the senior counsel to the Senate Intelligence Committee. An amazing opportunity. It all was amazing. I worked with then Senator Joseph Biden on something called the Classified Information Procedures Act. It's a little technical, but what used to happen is you try to put someone on trial who knew a lot of classified information. And of course, the CIA didn't want that classified information discussed in open trial. And so we were in a situation where people could break the law and say, great, if you charge me, I'm going to give every secret up I know, and the Russians will be there in the courtroom and they'll write it all down, and you'll be in trouble. So there were bad people who were not being brought to trial. With the Classified Information Procedures Act, we said, no, you have to tell us what classified information you're going to say in open court, and the judge will decide whether it's relevant or not. You can't just spill it all out. And we got that passed, which allowed bad people to be brought to trial.
In 1982, he took that experience a step further, running for Congress in California.
I worked at the Senate Intelligence Committee from 1977 to 1981. By 1981, Ronald Reagan had been elected president, and I'd moved from working for a committee headed by a Democratic chairman to a Republican chairman. And it seemed like the work I was doing wasn't valued anymore. On the other hand, in one of my favorite memories, this is when Senator Barry Goldwater, who was known as Mr. Conservative, and who was the presidential nominee for the Republicans in way back in 1964, we were sitting in a hearing once, and he was not young at this time, and he turned around to go talk to his staff member who was sitting behind him, but he couldn't get all the way around because, he had arthritis or something. So I'm sitting in back of the vice chairman of the committee, who's a Democrat, and he's a Republican. He's trying to get back to the person who's sitting behind him as chairman. He can't make it. So he turns around and looks right at me and says, isn't this true? Blah, 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 blah. And shouldn't you say blah, 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 blah? And the person who's sitting right in back of him, who will remain nameless, says, well, Senator. And then he manages to turn all the way around and say, I didn't ask you, I asked him. And I was happy to answer. I had a lot of, I didn't agree with Senator Goldwater on lots of issues, but I respected him immensely as a lover of America and a patriot. In any case, it was time to leave. And because I was crazy, naive, you pick the word, I went home to Palo Alto, California to run for Congress. So there I was, 30 years old, running for Congress, ready to go change the world. People ask me what that experience was like. I say it was like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. No matter how great the ride was, what you remember is the landing. And the landing, for me, in my one effort to win elective office, was plop, like a rotten tomato, all over the ground. But in any case, it was an experience. It was a great experience. It helped me grow.
He later went on to build a career in the tech industry back in California.
So after I'd lost, I spent a few months with my friend Mark up at Lake Tahoe, just sort of relaxing. Lake Tahoe is one of the most beautiful places in the world. He had a cabin up there. We gambled. Actually, did pretty well gambling. I'm old enough now that I can admit it. We also, we gambled, we played horses, we played blackjack, and it turns out that while campaigning, I'd met someone named Ken Oshman, who was the founder of one of the most successful companies in Silicon Valley. It was called ROLM, R-O-L-M Corporation. And he said, come by and see me sometime. I said, okay. Now, on Friday, I got a job offer to go be chief of staff for the mayor of San Jose. I think it was chief of staff, but something like that with the mayor of San Jose. But the problem was, there was no way to call Ken Oshman and tell him I want to cancel my 8 a.m. meeting on Monday morning. There was no voicemail. There was no email in those days. So I went to the meeting at 8 o'clock. I was feeling pretty good because I was getting a good job in San Jose that would keep me in politics. And then about half an hour into the conversation, he said, why don't you just come work for me? And I said, wow. And I said, okay. He said, how much money do you want to make? And I said, well, how much do you think it's worth? So the two of us sat there staring at each other for about a half an hour, neither one willing to go first. So he pushed a button, and the director of human resources came in, and he said, gee, Gibson, I want Keith to do this, this, and this. What do you think it's worth? Gibson said, this was a long time ago, $50,000 a year. Is that okay with you, Ken said? I said, yes, it is. And he said, yeah, me too. I started working for in tech. The funny thing is about that, because Ken was a great boss, 3 months later he gave me a 20% raise. So he really thought what I was doing was worth more. Now the deal that I made with Ken, who is one of the most brilliant men I've ever met, was he was running a Fortune 500 tech company pretty much by himself. He was here, he had a wonderful administrative assistant, but that was his whole staff. I knew nothing about business, nothing. He knew nothing about staff work and what a good staff person could do for him. So I'd put decision memoranda in front of him, I'd call meetings, I'd follow up, etc. And at the same time, he taught me how to run a business. And I think it was a good deal for both of us. And I was launched on a career in tech. It's funny that I was launched in a career in tech because my dad was one of the pioneers in technology, and he never understood what I was up to. My gosh, you're going to concentrate in history at Harvard? How are you ever going to make a living? How are you going to ever support a family? I took him to Widener Library and showed him all the books were there, completely unimpressed. he wanted to make sure this was a different age where he figured, as he did, that you were going to be the sole supporter of your family and you were going to have enough money to raise children, send them to school, etc. It turned out that I wouldn't say I was anything near one of the tech lords, but I did okay in Silicon Valley, and I was able to make a living, buy a house, send my kids to school, and my dad lived long enough to see that it turned out okay.
Over time, he started his own company and eventually turned to writing novels.
I was working for a tech company, and things were going well at the tech company. And I had a good job, and I enjoyed it. I might have been getting a little restless. I think if you look at my resume, every 5 or 6 years I start getting restless, and I think I must have been at about the 5 or 6 year point. One of the things I did while I was there is I'd look at the catalog I don't know how it came to me, but it came to me each quarter from the University of California Extension School. And I'd say, oh, Fred, look they're teaching a class on this computer science class on architecture for apps. Maybe you ought to take that. And they'd go, sure. Say to somebody in marketing, oh my gosh, look, there's a class in email marketing. Maybe you'll be able to take that. So in leafing through the catalog, I saw that there were writing classes, including one on writing mysteries. I loved mysteries. I grew up on the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, and I haven't stopped reading mysteries all those years. So I said, oh, for fun, let me do that. So I started writing a mystery for that class. But then, even though I loved the class and I really liked the people I was working with, it was time for me to go start my own company. So I put all that aside for years and years and started my own company in the Valley, which, in retrospect, it was the first company in the Valley that did web applications, software as a service, which I'm told is becoming obsolete now, but it wasn't obsolete when we did it. So we were the first company in the Valley to go do that. So I put all that writing stuff aside. And then we sold the company, and I had time, and I got that old manuscript out of a drawer. It was probably on floppy disks or something, and wrote that first mystery while I was working. The company was bought, as I mentioned. After a year, I could afford to leave, and I managed to get the book published, and then I published a couple more, all mystery novels. I was writing novels. I have 5 published mysteries, thrillers, historical novels, etc. And for me, those were a way to escape what's going on in the world, because I could launch myself into a world where me, was smarter, more courageous, more attractive, younger than I was in real life. I could go live in a world that I made up. But starting probably around 2015, I started thinking to myself, I can't spend all my time and all my creative time living in worlds I make up when this world is going to hell. I don't like the way this world's going. I love my family, I love my friends, but there's things going on in the world which I just am appalled by. And so I needed to speak out. And so I would write an occasional column that would be published in the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Jose Mercury, local papers, and they would run them. Thank you. And but then by around 2023, I bundled up those columns because I was more frustrated and angry than ever. And I sent them out and said, don't you want me to write a column? Don't you want to pay me to write a column for this? And Creator Syndicate said, yes, we do. And so I think that helps keep me sane, because I am so angry on the inside. It's so many things that are happening in the thoughtless, selfish way this country is being run, and things are being run in the world at large, that if I didn't write a column, I think I would burst. I think, Sam, you've heard me say that I might look like an old man on the outside, but I'm an angry young man on the inside. Not only am I angry, I'm angrier now than I was when I was a young man. So for 2 days a week, I work on writing a column. Tuesday morning I do a draft. Wednesday I finish it off. I always show it to my wife before I send it in, and she always, not always, 90% of the time, has constructive advice on how to make it better. And at least 90% of the time I take her advice because she's a perceptive, smart woman. And then I send it in and it runs in newspapers around the country. I think it was President Conant of Harvard who said Harvard had two responsibilities for its undergraduates. The first is to teach people how to make a living. I'm completely in favor of that, and I agree with that. But the second is to imbue within undergraduates the need to help make the world a better place, the need to be a better citizen of the world. So I think my message for undergraduates is that those both are important, not just the first one.
In a place where the future can feel so defined, Keith's story is a reminder that it doesn't have to be, that there's room to explore, to change direction, and to grow over time.
We've been through low, been through sunshine, been through snow. All the colors of the weather. We've been through high, every corner of the sky. And still we're holding on together. And you got all my love, whether it rains or pours, I'm all yours. You've got all my love, whether it rains, it remains. You've got all